Are you one of the parents this year who's been standing at the classroom or the school gate and your child is falling apart and they're clinging and crying and anxious at the thought of you leaving and dropping them off? I want you to hear this. Your kid is not broken. I've been there and I completely understand what it's like to leave your child feeling upset, and it's so heartbreaking, it's distressing for everyone. And what you're experiencing right now is something that a lot of families are going through with this particular group of kids. And I'm going to share with you who these kids are and what their early lives look like, and you'll see that it's going to make a lot of sense. So who are these kids? The children who started primary school this year, kindy or prep, depending on what state you're in, a lot of them were born in 2020 and 2021, which is right smack bang in the middle of the COVID pandemic. And these are the last of that cohort entering through school, which makes this particular conversation important right now. So I've been noticing a pattern in my work where separation anxiety is showing up as a significant presenting concern. It's clustering around this age group and across multiple families, but I'm not the only one noticing. There's been a lot written about this cohort lately, with headlines calling them the lockdown generation, and teachers saying that these kids are arriving to school 2 years behind. I can see why people are having this conversation. It's a genuine concern, but I don't think this framing is the most helpful, particularly if you are one of the parents whose child is struggling with separation anxiety. So I want to offer a different lens. So let's just stop to think about what actually happened for these kids. Those first months and years of a child's life actually do so much of the foundational work of a child learning, is this world safe? Can I trust it? And can I trust the people around me? And those experiences happened during a genuinely uncertain and stressful time where the world essentially shut down. So if we have a look at what typical infancy looks like, where we might be going to mothers groups and play dates, and we're bringing baby to new environments and new places, exploring new things. You and your bub are probably going to the playground, to the shops, and having exposure to lots of different experiences. And you're probably visiting friends and family. So your baby is seeing lots of new faces and being exposed to lots of different facial expressions. But none of that happened, or if it did, it happened in very limited and disrupted ways. What essentially happened was that these babies grew up around faces hidden behind masks, which meant they weren't getting the facial expression cues that help babies and toddlers learn to read whether someone is warm or joking or cross. And that's not a small thing. That's a fundamental part of how children learn to navigate their social and emotional world. So instead of easing into that social learning, a lot of these babies probably had to work a lot harder to be more vigilant, more watchful, and more discerning about the people and environments around them. And that's not a flaw. It's actually a very sensible adaptation to the world that they were in. And COVID feels like a distant memory now, like the world opened back up, and eventually most of these kids did get those experiences. But early developmental timing matters. We don't simply get to just reset the clock. For example, if you have a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old, they're both not getting the same experience when you visit a busy playground for the very first time. And so that's what's showing up in this cohort here. There's a growing body of research predating COVID that tells us that maternal stress during pregnancy can affect how a baby's nervous system develops. That high levels of anxiety and significant life events during pregnancy can shape the stress responses a baby is born with. I remember with my own pregnancy and giving birth at the height of COVID, it was a very different experience to the pregnancy and birth of my first. towards the later stage, I remember being moved to a different hospital because the hospital I was supposed to give birth at, ironically, had become a COVID testing clinic. And all of a sudden, we couldn't bring our support person with us to appointments anymore, and everything had turned really clinical with the staff wearing PPE gear, and we had to talk through perspex screens. It was a very vulnerable and fearful pregnancy for sure. I want to be really clear here. I'm not saying that stressed and anxious parents during COVID damaged our babies. We were doing the best that we could in a scary situation that had no roadmap. Where a child's development happens, that's not anyone's fault. That's just biology and context intersecting. What we can infer is that some of these children may have arrived into the world with their nervous system already primed for uncertainty, and then continue to live in that uncertain world through their earliest months and years. Now, I want to show you that Australia's been tracking children's development through a national census. It's called the Australian Early Development Census, which looks at 5 domains of development. So it covers physical health and well-being, social competence, emotional maturity, language and cognitive skills, and communication skills and general knowledge. So the census began in 2009, and we've got the latest data from 2024, and we can see the data before that from 2021. And you can see here that the developmental vulnerability has increased across all 5 domains, not just one area, across all of them, which means that the percentage of children who are developmentally on track across all 5 of these domains has actually decreased in recent years. We're talking about kids whose early development happened in genuinely abnormal conditions, so of course it's showing up now. So here's where I want to offer the different lens or the reframe. So what we've been naming as separation anxiety, what if we looked at that as proximity-seeking behaviour? It's an attachment need. A child who is anxious about separating from you is a child whose nervous system has learnt, and correctly based on their experience, that the world can feel unpredictable and that they need you as their safe base, someone who can offer them a sense of predictability. And so what if we look at their distress at drop-off not as dysfunction, but rather as communication? It's your child telling you, I need to know that you're there and that you're going to come back for me. But you might be thinking that there are developmental milestones and checklists and expected stages, and surely by school age, separation is a reasonable expectation. I get it. But even within formal developmental frameworks, those stages were never designed to be rigid age cutoffs. They were described as approximate windows, and more importantly, they depend on what's happening in the child's environment and their relationships, not just how old they are. And somewhere along the way, we've inherited this idea that children should be able to separate without distress. And when they can't, we treat it as a problem to fix. We distract, we minimize, and we find ways to manage the need rather than actually responding to the need itself. Like, who decided what age separation should look like? Where is that measuring stick, and where did it even come from? I've sat with this with my own parenting too. My COVID baby was very slow to warm. He was cautious a lot. We'd visit friends and he'd warm up in the last 10 minutes before we had to leave. And I felt this unspoken pressure to move things along and to follow a typical timeline, to be able to drop him off at daycare without a fuss. But everything I knew professionally and theoretically said otherwise. It's really hard to make active choices in parenting that are against what the majority are doing, against what mainstream advice might say, but I'm glad I backed myself with the theory. Responding to the need by staying close and building attachment security, that's what eventually allows children to build independence and separate with confidence. Security isn't built by practicing separation. It's built by the child's repeated experience of, I needed you and you were there. In short, your kid isn't faulty for needing you. So if drop-offs are hard right now and your kid is still struggling and you're wondering when this is going to end, you're wondering, is there something wrong with your child? Is there something wrong with your parenting? I want to offer this reframe. These are kids who came into this world with real uncertainty. Their nervous systems adapted to an environment that they were actually in, and who are now being asked to do something genuinely big. Of course, some of them need more time. And of course, some of them need more of you before they're ready to be without you. What if, instead of asking, what do I do to get my child to separate, we get curious about what's actually happening to them and what they might need from us right now? Keep an eye out for my next video. I'm going to look at advice that gets thrown at parents the most often during these moments, like the idea that kids just need to build resilience somehow, and why I think that framing is actually getting in the way of what our kids need. If this video resonated with you, like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and drop me a comment below. I'd love to know if this is something you're experiencing right now. And if you are, please know that you're not alone. Until next time, keep connecting.